You're wasting hours in Skyrim, and you probably don't even realize it. In this video, I'll show you 22 ways to cut the grind, skip the boring bits, and get straight to the fun. So if you value your time, then make sure you watch to the end because these tips are going to save you a lot of it. My first tip is that if you've been through the opening sequence and tutorial before, then you can instantly save yourself 20 minutes or so by installing a very simple mod that will allow you to skip Helgen entirely. Don't worry, this video won't be massively mod heavy if that's not your thing. I recommend a total of 3 very light touch mods. But this one really is an incredible quality of life feature. After all, it's pretty tedious having to listen to Rayloff banging on about a girl he used to be sweet on for the 17th time. This mod is called Alternative Start, Live Another Life, and it lets you choose from a set of starting locations and scenarios that all allow you to skip the tutorial in Helgen entirely. You still get to create your character normally, but then you're dropped right into Skyrim and you can immediately go about your adventures, which is massively convenient for anyone who's already seen the intro a dozen times. Alternatively, if you don't want to use mods, then I'd advise that next time you run through the tutorial that you make a manual save the instant you leave Helgen. That way you can always go back and start a new playthrough without having to repeat the entire opening sequence. The main problem with this is that if you do this, you're basically stuck with one race in that save file because you pick your race at the very beginning of the tutorial and you can't change it after that point. You may think that using a console command to change your race is the obvious solution to this, but I really wouldn't recommend it as it can result in various bugs. My second time-saving tip is to take advantage of the often overlooked carriage system. In Skyrim, carriages can be found outside of every major city gate, and for a small fee, they'll whisk you away to any major hold capital even if you haven't been there before. This is absolutely worth doing because once you've discovered a city via carriage, you can then fast travel there for free at any time. The cost to ride in one of these carriages is only 20 to 50 gold depending on the location, and it can save you from some really long treks across the map. Basically, you can use the carriages to really quickly populate your map with fast travel points. I'd still encourage you to use it somewhat sparingly though, and that's because by fast traveling everywhere, you're going to miss a lot of random encounters and roadside discoveries. And that's fine when you're looking for a bit of efficiency, for example when you're having to trek the whole length of the entire map to carry out some mundane task. But I'd advise making sure you blend this approach of exploring as well, because that's a lot of what the game's about. While we're on the efficient travelling theme, I'd also recommend getting your hands on a horse sooner rather than later. Not only do horses move faster than running on foot, but they have insane traction on steep terrain for some reason. Skyrim horses can scale some almost vertical surfaces that you would absolutely have to walk around on foot, which means that they enable you to take more direct routes over mountains and cliffs, which allows you to reach your destination faster. They're also pretty handy when you need to escape certain situations, such as when you accidentally wander into a giant camp at low level and need to hightail it out of there. You can buy a horse from the stables outside of any city for 1,000 gold, as well as being able to obtain horses through various other means. I won't list all of them in this video, but one particularly good horse comes from progressing the Dark Brotherhood questline until you unlock the famous Shadowmere. On top of the benefits already covered, horses also allow you to ride at full speed and even fast travel while you're over encumbered, which can save a huge amount of time as getting over encumbered is a real pace killer. You move at the speed of a slug, and if you're not willing to sacrifice items by dropping them, then you're going to be having to waddle all the way back to town, which takes forever. Also, by having a horse, you're just going to need fewer trips back to town in general. However, it's not just horses that help you to deal with this problem. Alchemy is also a really useful tool as it allows you to create fortified carry weight potions. And these are particularly useful in places that you can't summon your horse, such as dungeons. Using a fortified carry potion can be a massive time saver in this scenario, as it's going to allow you to quickly exit the dungeon rather than having to crawl out at a snail's pace after looting the weapons from the final boss chest. Just make sure that you get to either a merchant or your horse before the effect of the potion wears off. If you find yourself over encumbered at the end of the dungeon without a fortified carry potion, then you can always use the Whirlwind Sprint shout to help you get to the exit faster as it ignores encumbrance. The 2-word version of this shout is the most efficient to use in this scenario as it gives you the highest distance travelled per second of recharge time, allowing you to dash forward 75 feet every 25 seconds. The Greybeards will teach you the first word as part of the main quest, and then you'll need to travel to the associated word wall to unlock the second. I certainly wouldn't recommend this as a primary method for dealing with encumbrance, but it's definitely worth knowing about and using if you find yourself in the situation I've just described. It's also handy for zipping over traps in dungeons without taking damage, and it can even be useful for traversing difficult terrain and getting to hard to reach areas. Though I'd highly recommend saving before you try anything too adventurous, as this is a great way to glitch the game and potentially cost yourself some progress. Speaking of shouts that aid traversal, you can also take advantage of the Become Ethereal shout to temporarily negate fall damage, which essentially allows you to take shortcuts by leaping off mountains and cliffs rather than taking the slow climb down. It's not like it's something you're going to be using constantly, but it's still worth knowing about as it can shave a few minutes of frustratingly navigating your way down a mountain. Also, the first word of this shout is discovered in Ustengrav during the main quest, so you don't exactly have to go out of your way to get it. Let's move on now to some time savers when it comes to leveling and skill progression. Firstly, one of the simplest ways to save time while leveling is to make use of Skyrim's XP bonus systems. Right after escaping Helgen, or upon starting anywhere if you use the alternative start mod, travel to the Guardian Stones near Riverwood and activate one of them to receive its blessing. Each Guardian Stone grants you 20% faster skills in each of the 3 major categories: Mage, Thief and Warrior skills. And I'd recommend that you pick the stone that matches the skills that you plan to focus on first. For example, the Warrior Stone if you're going to be fighting with melee weapons, or the Thief Stone if you want to focus on stealth and archery. And you can fast travel back to the stones at any point when you want to swap, so don't agonize too much over the decision. Of course, if you don't want to keep travelling back to the Guardian Stones, then a great compromise is to activate the Lover Stone instead, which gives you a universal 15% experience to skills in every category. On top of getting a blessing from these stand-in stones, you can also get the Well Rested bonus by sleeping in a bed that you own or in an inn. This gives you a 10% XP bonus for 8 hours, or a 15% bonus if you sleep with your spouse for the Lover's Comfort buff. These bonuses stack with the free Guardian Stone blessings, giving you a 30 to 35% experience boost with basically zero downside. However, the rested bonuses don't stack with the Lover Stone, so you need to consider that as part of the trade-off. That is unless you take advantage of a slightly more advanced method to really supercharge your experience gains. This involves making clever use of the unique effect of the Ethereal Crown, an item that you can get hold of through the Dawnguard DLC. This unique helm, with a bit of strategy, will allow you to have a Guardian Stone blessing, a Lover Stone blessing, and still be able to stack it with the sleeping buffs. Basically, the Ethereal Crown allows you to store the blessing of a standing stone within it, and the effect of that blessing will be applied to you whilst you're wearing the crown. So what you do is you go and store the Lover Stone blessing within the crown. Then you go to the Guardian Stones and activate whichever Guardian Stone you want the blessing from. Then you just need to travel to a bed that you own or within an inn that you've paid for and take off the Ethereal Crown before you go to sleep. You'll wake up with the Well Rested bonus, and then you can immediately pop the Ethereal Crown back on. And by doing so, you've stacked the Lover Stone blessing, a Guardian Stone blessing, and the Rested or Lover's Comfort bonus. And by using this method, you can achieve up to a 50% XP boost for 8 in-game hours to a full category of skills, depending on which Guardian Stone blessing you chose to activate. I'm not necessarily saying that it pays to power level in Skyrim, but this is an incredibly useful method to save you some time if a skill that you want to use starts to fall behind. Or if you suddenly decide that you want to level up one of your crafting skills, for example, but you don't want to spend hours doing it. That actually leads into another tip for efficiently leveling skills that fall behind, and this one's far less convoluted. And that's to make sure that you take advantage of skill trainers to train 5 levels in a skill that you're behind on every time your character levels up. I say 5 because that's the limit of how many skills you can train per character level. It doesn't cost a huge amount of gold, and if you're really struggling for cash, you could be especially sneaky and pickpocket the gold right back from the trainer after they finish training you. Very dishonest, of course, but if you're role-playing a slippery thief, then it might play right into your character. By the way, if that trainer has the ability to become a follower, then you don't even have to rob them, as you can make them train you and then just access their inventory and take the gold right back without even breaking the law. Just be aware though that the unofficial Skyrim patch, which a lot of people will have installed, does remove this particular trick by basically just not giving the follower that gold. But if you're more lightly modding or perhaps just using vanilla mechanics, then this method still stands. Speaking of skills, some of them are just ridiculously slow to level with normal use. Illusion magic is one of them. So if you're finding that your illusion skills lagging behind and you don't want to spend forever grinding, then the fastest way to level up illusion is simply to cast the muffle spell repeatedly whilst you're going about your normal business. It's possible to go from illusion 15 to 100 extremely quickly and easy by simply spamming muffle, especially if you've stacked the XP bonuses from earlier tips. And even if you don't have any interest in illusion, this can be a cheeky way of gaining some easy levels and therefore perk points to spend in the skills that you actually do want to use. The only real limitation to how fast you can do this is your magicka pool, and you can just use the rest function to constantly reset it. You can also do this with conjuration magic by repeatedly casting Soul Trap on a dead body over and over. Though, much like the follower training trick, it is important to note that the unofficial Skyrim patch removes your ability to do this, as it prevents gaining XP from dead targets. So if you have that mod installed, you'd need to remove or disable it to use this method, or you just have to stick to a more legitimate conjuration leveling process, such as summoning bound weapons in combat. However, in an unpatched game, this can be a pretty huge time saver for conjuration. Though admittedly, it is pretty tedious given that you can't simply spam it whilst going about your business like you can with muffle, as you need a dead body to cast it on. The main reason I've used this trick previously is to unlock a quick 50 skill points in conjuration in order to take advantage of the excellent bound bow skill early on. While we're talking about skills that can give you a head start in the early game, I'd suggest that a highly time efficient way of generating some gold early on is to use the alchemy skill. Basically, combining ingredients using alchemy will result in a potion that has a higher gold value than that of its ingredients. And with certain recipes, that can be a ludicrous amount of gold, as shown on the screen right now. However, the time-saving technique here is to ensure that you loot every single ingredient you come across as part of your normal organic playthrough. Then, each time you visit a city, combine those ingredients using alchemy and flog the resulting potions to a vendor. If you do this consistently, this will net you as much gold as you'll likely ever need in the game, unless you have aspirations to own and furnish every single house, I suppose. And you can accomplish this by not making any more effort really than remembering to loot ingredients when you naturally come across them. On the subject of crafting skills, another particularly powerful one is smithing. But the problem is, it can be a bit of a pig to level given all the materials you need to acquire in order to progress. However, once you hit smithing level 30, which I'd suggest you do by simply spamming iron daggers, you can take a perk called Dwarven Smithing. And with this perk, an extremely efficient path to maxing your smithing skill opens up. And that's Dwarven Metal Farming. Basically, Dwemer ruins are littered with scrap metal that can be smelted into dwarven ingots, basically providing you with huge quantities of smithing materials without having to run around looking for ore veins to mine. All you need to do is delve into these Dwemer ruins and collect every bit of dwarven metal scrap that you can get your hands on. Of course, being metal, some of this stuff can be pretty heavy, so don't forget the earlier tips on how to deal with being over-encumbered. Then, when you've got as much dwarven metal scrap as you can carry, then you simply need to take it to a forge and start the process of turning it into dwarven weapons and armor in order to level smithing. To make this even more efficient, while delving in those ruins, you should consider completing the Unfathomable Depths quest, which can be started by speaking to an Argonian named From Deepest Fathoms in Riften. The synergy here is that this quest rewards a buff called Ancient Knowledge, which gives you a 15% bonus to smithing XP, while also sending you into a dungeon full of Dwemer metal scrap to get it, so double bubble. In fact, you can also sell the items you craft for a decent amount of gold as well, so triple bubble, if that's even a thing. Well, it's a thing in Dwemer Ruins, obviously. Now, speaking of delving into exciting content, you can delve into the bonus videos offered by a Vress Games YouTube membership, including bonus guides, RPG discussion videos, and other RPG-related content. And I also have a Patreon if you want to unlock all of these benefits, plus a few extras, including private Discord channel access. Oh, and for both YouTube members and Patreon members, I'll put your name in the credits of my video as a thank you. You can find links to become a YouTube member or Patreon in the description down below. Anyway, let's move on to some more time-saving tips, with the next few focusing on combat. Of course, one huge time saver in combat is simply dealing more damage so fights don't drag out forever. And if you're going for the ever popular stealth archer build, then the bound bow spell is a fantastic choice for efficiently taking out your enemies. This spell allows you to summon a Daedric quality bow at a very early stage in the game, which makes you incredibly overpowered. It's not even that difficult to get hold of. You simply need to travel to Fort Amel, which can be found at this location on the map, enter the prison area and loot the bound bow tome as I'm showing in the video right now. The only catch is that you need 50 conjuration skill in order to use it, but the good news there is that you already know how to get that from watching tip number 11. Oh, and make sure you put some attribute points into Magicka when you level up to ensure that you actually have enough Magicka to cast the bound bow spell. This will avoid disappointment and the inevitable upset in this video's comments section. Anyway, the bound bow spell is going to help you to blaze through encounters that might otherwise be tough slogs, and if it makes things a little too easy, then you can always up the difficulty. It's not just about speed after all, there's definitely a comfortable balance to strike. Another tip for taking enemies down at lightning speed, however, is to take advantage of stealth modifiers. Yes, this might be obvious to veteran players, but new players may not realize that you can spend points in sneak that will increase the damage of dagger and bow attacks from stealth by a ludicrous amount. At the extreme end, making stealth attacks with daggers deal 15 times the damage of a normal attack, which results in enemies frequently dying in a single hit. You can even take this a step further and actually reach a 30 times damage multiplier by stacking these perks with the Shrouded Gloves or Cicero's Gloves. And at that point, very few enemies in the game are going to survive a single hit from stealth. So basically, if you master stealth and incorporate these perks, you can tear through dungeons like a whirlwind. And even if you don't care about the speed, it's just an incredibly fun way to clear a dungeon regardless. You could of course take the pacifist route, or the thieves route if you want it to sound more glamorous, and use your sneak skill to work your way through dungeons and other scenarios without actually entering combat at all. If your sneak skill's high enough, then there are many encounters in which you can stealthily work your way past enemies without alerting them to your presence, grab the quest items or loot that you need, and then make off with them before your enemies even realised what happened. If you're especially daring, you could even pick a pocket or two. That's right, Oliver Twist that bad boy. But yeah, if you're short on time and want to squeeze one more quest in, then stealth could offer you an interesting opportunity to do so. Another thing that can save you a huge amount of wasted time, potentially hours, is the simple practice of remembering to save the damn game. I feel like I include this tip in every video I ever make, but it's just so important, especially in the context of time-saving tips. Do not rely on Skyrim's autosave system, it's going to let you down at some point and you're potentially going to lose hours of progress. And if you're a busy person that doesn't have a lot of time to play the game, then this could easily be the straw that breaks the camel's back and you just stop playing the game entirely, potentially missing out on a ton of enjoyment that you could have gotten from finishing your playthrough. So yeah, make sure you use both the quick save function by pressing F5 for in the moment type saves if you're going into a dangerous encounter, as well as making regular full manual saves just in case quick saves let you down. Like if you use a quick save just before you get trapped in some sort of game-breaking bug. Anyway, let's round things off with a few what you might call administrative time savers that combined can really free up some serious playtime to enjoy doing stuff that's more fun than, you know, inventory management. Especially given that Skyrim's inventory management UI leaves a lot to be desired. Speaking of which, if you want a far easier to navigate UI that will make Skyrim inventory management far less painful and time consuming, then I'd suggest installing the Sky UI mod. This is an incredibly popular mod that completely overhauls the clunky console style menus with a mouse friendly interface. And for that reason it's widely regarded as a must-have mod for Skyrim on PC. Basically, Sky UI just gives you a much more convenient and easy to navigate inventory system, replacing Skyrim's basic UI in which you have to scroll for what feels like an eternity to find the item that you're looking for. Sure, the time you save might feel small in each instance, but when you consider how often you open your inventory, you can see how it really starts to stack up and eat into that precious gaming window with monotonous admin. You may also want to consider using a quick loot mod to complement this so that you don't have to open a full inventory window every time you loot a body or container. Mods like Quick Loot EE, for example, will display a small loot menu when you look at a container, letting you grab items with one click rather than having to transition into the full inventory screen. This is a nice quality of life feature, and it just saves a ton of time when you multiply it by the hundreds of chests, barrels and bodies that you're going to loot in a playthrough. And again, it's not about rushing the game, it's about reallocating the time into things that are actually fun in the game. If you're someone who finds inventory management exhilarating, of course, then you can safely ignore these tips, and more power to you. Another simple thing that you can do when it comes to inventory management is to loot smart. In Skyrim, not all loot is created equal. And one major time waster is picking up every last pot, pan and iron sword, only to get over encumbered and spend half your adventure waddling back and forth to merchants. To save yourself some time and effort in this regard, and to actually be far more efficient when it comes to making gold, then adopt the habit of looting selectively. Focus on items with a high value to weight ratio like jewelry, enchanted light items, potions and gems, and just drop the cheap heavy stuff whenever your carry weight starts to fill up. If you do decide to use the Sky UI mod, it actually shows the weight value ratio of your items that makes it a bit easier to decide which ones to throw away. But even without mods, it's a pretty easy calculation to make on the fly. You can also utilize your followers to cut down on trips back and forth to town in order to sell your loot to merchants. This is due to the fact that a follower can carry a huge amount of weight for you, massively extending your loot hauling capacity. All you need to do is speak to your follower and ask them to carry some items for you, and they'll gladly serve as your pack mule. Then, when you get to town, simply park them next to a vendor like a shopping trolley and start flogging the items that they've dutifully carted along for you. Of course, there are going to be some items that you don't want to sell, but you might not be ready to use just yet. For these items, you're going to need a more permanent storage solution, and the best option for this is a player house. It's going to save you a lot of time in the long run to store key materials to help you level your crafting skills, for example, rather than selling them and then having to go out spending hours grinding them when you actually get to the point that you want to start leveling those skills. The reason that a player house is so useful for this is because it gives you safe, non-resetting storage for all of the items you want to keep but not carry. You can dump crafting materials, extra gear, collectibles, and whatever you want in a chest at your home instead of lugging them around or storing them in random barrels, which can reset and delete your stuff. Breeze Home in Whiterun is usually the earliest and cheapest house. It costs 5,000 gold and becomes available after the first few main quests. That is unless you have the anniversary edition of the game, in which there are a number of player houses that you can obtain for free. I'll link my player housing guide in the description down below if you want to know more about that, because that's a pretty deep subject. Trust me when I say this, nothing wastes time like realizing your stash of smithing materials got wiped out because you left them in an unsafe container. Anyway, that should hopefully help you to shave off some time from the more tedious tasks in Skyrim and help focus your play sessions on the more enjoyable stuff. Of course, there's still plenty more to learn on top of this, and I have tons more Skyrim guide content on my channel, and as I already mentioned, even more to offer through Patreon and YouTube membership. So check that out by following the links in the description down below, and as always, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.